Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the 4400. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, picking up in the aftermath, the last episode with Shanice's, escape, now there's a lot of questions. In particular, Keisha's pushing forward of, trying to figure out how Shanice escaped, but obviously Shanice brings out the law of, right, you holding us without due process, and like we didn't do anything wrong, yet you're holding us. So she's fighting back against that. And obviously there's a conversation. They even asked Mildred at one point, like, well, how did Shanice get out? It's like, I don't know. It's like, well, you were there with her. So they're trying to figure out what's happening on that front. They're not getting the answers they want. But it's also the situation of the 4400 aren't as receptive because they've been locked up this entire time, especially Shanice. She wants to be reunited with their family, but they're being treated as like they're, it's like, obviously there's a conversation of Keisha talked to her girlfriend last episode about might be something alien involved in this, but she still doesn't want to jump down that possibility. They meet Sharisa, who is the kind of person that's kind of open to a lot of stuff. I love that she was like, yeah, I'm very good at reading body language, because she's the one that notices Shanice didn't expect the door to open. She just took advantage of it. It's like, oh, wait, it's like, oh, no. She's like, I watched enough reality TV. She's like, honestly, I went to MIT and went to Quantico, but that's the boring way of me knowing. It's like, those shows they might be trash TV, but they're a really good examination of, I mean, to a certain extent, I guess you could also say reality TV is kind of like an interesting study of the human condition, but obviously we showcase more, at the doc and LaDonna, whole conversations about, well, we find out specifically where LaDonna's from. She's from 2015. She was like, yeah, I was just somewhere here in 2015, and now I'm suddenly here. So it seems, once again, still not fully sure what time frame everyone's from. We know Shanice is from 16 years ago, but what about, so it seems like Donna's 5 or 6. Is there anyone from a shorter time frame? Still unclear, but obviously the showcasing of the character who has the self-healing ability. Obviously, she convinces LaDonna to break her finger, because she's like, go ahead and do it. It's like, oh, it's okay that you're scared. She's like, I ain't scared enough. I took blah 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 down with a stiletto here, which the doctor's like, I don't know what a stiletto is, but. And breaks her finger, and she recovers. And for her, it's if I can be somewhat if I can recover from anything, if I get shot or attacked by a guard, we could use that to our advantage, because I'll snap back, because we don't know the full capabilities of her healing. What is this healing factor? Are we talking Deadpool? We talking Wolverine here? What is it? Could she survive multiple gunshots, or would it be if her heart gets destroyed, if her brain gets destroyed, zombie rules? Would that, we don't know the full extent of what her capability is. I also love LaDonna's the one that kind of suggesting time travel rules. She's suggesting maybe this is Outlander. I'm like, hey, because that show probably would have around the time she disappeared would have been that show would have come out, but it's just kind of because it's also based on a book too, but it's I think she's specifically referencing the show. So but I love that she's kind of saying that maybe this is their circumstances, but it's not just her. Obviously, we already got introduced to Mildred's telekinetic abilities last episode, but we get introduced to a new ability this episode, and it's Noah. And Noah seems to have a siren song type of ability. The song creates a fixation. So the guard, when they ended up getting the snacks and Noah's singing about it, the guard becomes obsessed with them, and then later on it's used to put Jarrell and Keisha to sleep. So what that siren song can be, I guess it depends on the intent of the, maybe not necessarily the words of the song, but the intentions behind them. So the song could probably be used to hurt people if need be. I don't know. I'm curious to fully understand the full capabilities of that, because it's not because it puts you in a trance, but it seems the trance does different things. Like I said, just makes you obsessed with the particular thing that Noah was singing about, versus Jarrell and Keisha being actually put to sleep in that regard. We also had Shanice talking to Logan because Keisha was able to convince him just to come. It's like, right, we don't know what's going on. Because Keisha was also trying to blame Shanice, saying like, oh, like someone leaked about the 4400. But it's like, doesn't seem like any of them did. If you would think out of anyone who potentially did it, you would think it was Jarrell. But we know this is one sector, like they're dealing with this in other places as well. Because the 4400 aren't just allocated to that one hotel like a lot of our main characters are. But like the others in other facilities, because a person I think Jarrell's in contact with, I think she's working at the other facilities as well. So there might be, so that person he's in contact with might be, all right, you feel like out of anyone, it probably would be Jarrell that would probably leak this type of thing. But it's like he still wants to, he believes, whereas Keisha's kind of like, nah, like they're definitely keeping stuff from us. They're not really helping us. Like, help us help you. But Jarrell's like, well, if we give them a little bit more freedom, let them kind of like show that we're actually here to help, then maybe they'd be a lot more open and receptive to us. But obviously you have your power tripping guards. It's one in particular. Some others are just kind of falling in line because they are following orders, but there's just that one dude in charge who's like straight tripping. Because he's the one that pushes Noah later. Because like Noah didn't even do anything. And he's like, I'm the one that was singing. Like, why you got beef with him? It's just me. It's like he's just like irrationally angry for whatever reason. It's like, don't know what that's all about. But circling back to it, Shanice ends up, talking to Logan. He was convinced to come here by Keisha because it's like, right, did you know what's happening? He's like, no, she has no idea what's going on. And hoping that basically, like talking to Logan, that Keisha's hoping that Shanice will be a little bit more open. And it's like, they talk a little bit about everything. And it's like, write your note and everything. She's like, I was going through something, I was like postpartum depression. It's normal. He's like, but what he basically, from Logan's perspective, is like, what was I supposed to think? All I found was a letter. You never talked to me about it. He even kind of suggests like, Shanice has never been one to ask for help. And so it's like, right, but can I see our daughter? But it's like, no, like, I don't know what this whole thing is. And I'm just, until we figure it out, I think it's best, because it's like, what if she gets here and she gets attached to you? What if you disappear again, And also ask, like, oh, so the person you're with, like, Logan, did you and her ever have any children? It's like, no. So it's like, yeah, they might be together, but it's just, he wanted someone to be there for their daughter. Like, it's like, he was sad and heartbroken because in his mind, he thought Shanice ran away. And but their daughter is a lot more receptive to wanting to meet her mom. It's like, I've only known about her from pictures, and it seems like her and her dad have like a very like open like dialogue. But it's like, this is something you snuck off and did this. You went to see her without me, and now you're shutting down a conversation without letting me go see her. The kid that's hanging out with Mildred and Noah this episode, he's mainly around Mildred, but he's also like very much like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stay here later on when everyone gets the opportunity to leave, because Keisha kind of finds a way around it. But it's like, the fact is that he's like, I want to stay. It's like, because he figures, I guess he knows like, this is where I'm meant to be. I need to be here. Because I guess maybe on some level he knew what was going to go down. Like, it's just like, because Keisha's asking about like, right, the whole Manny thing, and he's like, right, I know, I heard people talk, and she's like, oh, or is this some bit like prank that everyone's in on? It's like, he doesn't want to talk about how he knows. I wonder, does Mildred know, like, because he knows about Mildred's thing, because like, once again, he stopped her last episode from making the guard attack himself, so he knows. But like I said, I brought it up last episode, I think he's very much like Cal from Manifest, if that means anything to you, that he's the centerfold of this. Like, he has some like psychic connection to everyone involved, so he doesn't understand everything that's going on, but he understands the people around him and what they're feeling and what they're going through. Like, he connects in them on a level, so maybe like he could hear, like, maybe he's telekinetic, so like, not telekinetic, I made that mistake last episode, maybe it's like telepathy, so he's reading Jarrell's mind about his brother, but for him to say like, right, he's okay, it means you're tapping into something somewhere. Don't fully understand his circumstances, but he definitely seemed like he's going to be the key figure going forward with everything, so. But a big chunk of this episode is learning about the Reverend's past. He was torn between what his family wanted him to be, in particular his dad, versus him being in love with a woman that, she wasn't of the faith, but they run a pretty big church, and it's kind of like their family's thing. It's like kind of passed down, like his father wants to pass it down to him, and he's in love with a woman, and she's even pregnant. But, obviously, I think the conversations about, like, right, having a baby out of wedlock probably wouldn't have been that good of a conversation. He just says that he's in love with a woman, but it's like, oh, who is she? Like, oh, who's her family? He's like, she's not of this faith. And it's like, oh, because she isn't. It's like, because his dad's like, you need someone by your side that will help you lead this, because this is kind of a heavy burden to bear. Obviously, she's not as receptive to the whole situation, because she figures it's like, right, I knew you'd cave when it comes to your dad. You always do in your family, because your family is this rich, affluent force in the community of like, for her, it's from the perspective of you guys have this power and sway over people to make people do whatever you want to. And it's like, because he'd even brought it up early at one point, like about like his dad's ring, because it's like, right, like that ring is more money than a lot of people can make in a year. So it is a situation that we're really well off, but are we really like, because it's like we have this big church and everything, but it's like, right, we can do God's work anywhere. I can do God's work anywhere. And the fact is, shouldn't that matter? It's just for him, it feels like we're getting like he's, you know, he was like, we're getting too caught up in the money and position, but his father like talks out about like, we're here because God wants us to be here. The fact is, you think it's just about the money, like, you know, dollars and cents, then like you've kind of lost your way. That the fact is that we are given this position by God to be there for these people who are lost, who kind of don't have much. We're here to give them something that no one, like God gave us this position to give them hope, you know? And so our Reverend didn't have that perspective back then. And I feel like it was a misguided perspective, because he chose love. And it's like, he wanted love. The family ring, he wanted it to be a reminder of who he wasn't going to be. He's like, I'm not going to be my dad. I'm not going to be like, because I don't think he fully, like, because his dad said all that, but it seems a little less altruistic when it's just like, right, you have this money, this position, and this power. But maybe it just almost, it feels like that thing of like, no, God. It's like, I think, and maybe there's a parallel they're drawing, because you know there are preachers or pastors or whatever, they're like, oh, God said I needed this jet. Like, you'll find compilations and stuff like that on YouTube and stuff like that about like pastors or whoever like are speaking out, but like they're like very well off, which is like you would never think to know like a pastor or something as like super well off. It just seems like, right, like you're doing way better than your own community. You're there servicing them spiritually, but it almost feels like you're shoveling some horse shit essentially. So obviously, no disparagement against anyone but like, religion is just one of those easy things that can be just so easily twisted. I mean, history has shown how easily that can, like, people's faith can be twisted and contorted. Am I saying, like, every religion's like that? No, but I'm talking about the most extremist routes of, like, they're extremists on any fashion across any religion that will contort and manipulates people's faith and belief into what they need it to be. And it feels like, I mean, just for me, it just felt like the Reverend's father, like, kind of felt a little bit like that. Like, he was trying to act like, oh, this God gave us this position, but he made it seem like he was coming from a better place. But even the Reverend's like, yeah, like, I'm not going to be anything like my dad, because he's like, he kind of sees through his dad, despite all what his dad is saying. It's like, I see you kind of who you really are, but I'm choosing love. I'm choosing the woman I love. I'm choosing our child. But, you know, he was going to propose to her, but he ended up getting taken here. And he's the one that's initially like, oh, let's go to Belle Island, because the whispers are like, right, if we go to Belle Island, maybe we'll end up in a situation like, you know, like LaDonna was saying, like with the whole conversation of maybe we'll end up back where we were. So that's part of the conversation. But another angle to it is, obviously it's mainly because the Reverend wants to pick up, you know, something, and we find out it's the ring. But Keisha's the one that's like, you're getting people's hopes up, because people are starting to whisper, thinking like, oh, like, you know, there's something beneficial to this. But it's like, you only want to go because there's something beneficial to you. And he's like, yes, true, but like everyone could use with stretching their legs. And so it's not until that little kid talks to Keisha and points out, like, right, like, how can we be okay? Like, how can we be receptive to you when we're not free? We're basically prisoners here. And that's what shifted things for Keisha, that she actually went to Darrell and was like, all right, so I'm going to try and get them out. And even he was like, whoa, really? You miss, like, by the books? You want to... It's like, yeah, I'll have to lie to my girlfriend, but, you know, we don't have to take everyone out, just a select few, but at least it'll give them an opportunity to stretch, and then maybe they will be a little bit more receptive, because it is about being there for people. It's like, you know, because she's like, I'm not a robot. I'm like, might come off a little harsh. I might be a stickler for, but it's like, it's just simply she's trying to figure things out, and she has a job to do, and that might not always be copacetic with, what everyone else is going through, not being as receptive to what everyone's going through. But I think she's that sensibility is tuning a little bit to be more sensitive and sympathetic to their circumstances. So she, ends up taking them out. But this is when the Reverend, realizing he chose the wrong path before, and now he thinks I'm here for a reason because God wants me to be here. And so he has Noah sing and put Jarrell and Keisha to sleep so they're not privy to the conversation. And so at first when he starts levitating, I was like, oh, that's his power. But it's like, no, it's Mildred lifting him up. And it's like, right. So Noah's putting them to sleep. Mildred's lifting me up. It's like, this is what we are. We are here for a reason because God wants us to be. Like, we are his chosen special few. And the character who can heal herself, she wanted to be special. Like, she just wanted, and it sounds like she's talking from personal experience of just like, she wanted to feel like the special one that people turn to it, And I think more so than anything, it's probably because probably in her own, because she talked about being married to someone like the Reverend, being, someone who's powerful like that. And I guess it's like, she was kind of more of an object type of situation. It feels like that's kind of where that's coming from. Like, oh, like I'm meant to be his and no one else's. My star has to be dimmed because he wants me to be his and only his. And she kind of talked about it in the first episode about like knowing someone like the Reverend because she's married to someone like him, being able to like manipulate and control people, which, as I pretty much said, that's probably the role that the Reverend was going to go down. I just wasn't expecting it this soon, but for him, it's like, right, I'm here and I'm going to lead you. Like, we're all special. Once again, they don't know, and now it's like, the Doc's fascinated from a, standpoint of like, right, this is something miraculous. Like, he knew like there was a few, but he didn't expect like, he knew about the healing ability, but he didn't know like, right, there's Noah's ability, there's Mildred's, like, he didn't know all about that. And so, but, Shanice is also listening to all of this as well. And I think the warnings about the Reverend, like, kind of hit a little home of, like, right, do want to be careful with someone. I mean, that's how cults get started. It's like, oh, you just need, like, you have to be in a vulnerable position and you just have the right charismatic person saying all the right keywords to point you in the direction where they want. So it's like, he made it clear, like, yeah, I'm a lead my flock, him being it was set up right there perfectly from the beginning that this was going to be that, being a Reverend, being a smooth talker like he is. The fact is that other people already kind of got them, I don't know if I trust you, but he's already kind of set the stage for himself of like, yeah, we're all special. And so he's already kind of turning the tides in their favor. But the moment Keisha and Jarrell wake up, it's like Keisha doesn't believe, like, because the 4400 pretended like, oh man, we're waking up too, something made us all fall asleep. It's like, she's like, no, like, they're probably lying to us. Like, was it some kind of weapon or something that made us go to sleep? I don't know. But she knows that she's being lied to. She just doesn't know, because once again, she's still looking for some rational explanation, which Sharika was kind of like, it's believing that there's a rational explanation for everything is kind of like, she was kind of implying like early on in the episode, that's kind of misguided. So they bring her into the flow because for her, she doesn't believe the 4400 should be locked up like they are, because there are people that legitimately have no idea how they got here, why they're here. Was it for, as the Reverend wants to kind of make it seem like it is God's reason, because of God, that they are here. For some reason. It's like, yeah, they left their lives behind, because that was also the thing too. Like, Shanice had talked to the Doc and was asking him about, oh, you want to look into your family? But he's like, it's 2021, everyone I know and care about is dead. And it's like, yeah, it's a harsh reality where, like, at least Shanice is in a situation where it's like, yeah, it's been 16 years, because she even brought that up to Logan. It's like, do I look like I'm 16 years older? Because Keisha even told the Reverend, like, she found his lady as well as his son. And it's like, but he chooses like, no, like, I'm choosing my mission, why I'm really here, because I'm going to inspire these people. I'm going to give them hope. I'm going to follow my following that I turned away from. I turned away from like what God had planned for me for my own selfish reasons. But it's like, this is where I'm meant to be. Like, this is the role that's been cast for me. This is the role that was like, as his father was kind of, he used his literal word of preordained, which just seems a little, I don't know. It just seems too like, what's the word? Arrogant? I don't know. Like, maybe I'm talking from like, I'm not the biggest religious person, so maybe but it just feels like to say like, oh, like you're calling, I don't know, maybe calling it ordained is the same thing, but it just seems like so, like saying like, oh, I was ordained to this, just, it feels so, using that word in particular, it just feels so like high and mighty, like, oh, like I'm so important. Like, that's why it rubs me the wrong way. If he was like, it was my calling, like I said, I feel like calling and ordained could be interchangeable, but maybe not, they're maybe not as interchangeable as I think they are. But it just, I don't know. And just knowing that the Reverend's kind of taking this, you know, he's a lot more like his father than he want to be. I mean, especially now because he's doubling down on believing, like, I need to be, like, because we don't know what the status of his family in the church actually is in his absence. But it set up a lot of really interesting things. Even the stinger at the end, where Jarrell finds that clock drawn on him, because he brought it up earlier. It's like, it's a thing him and his brother would do. They'd find it and they'd add one notch. Like, they'd keep going until the entire clock was done. They do it like one piece at a time. So, because for him, he wanted clarity. He's like, right, if something happens to the 4400, whatever the case may be, at the very least, if they do go back, then at very least he can put this whole Manny thing, because it reignited that thing of like, maybe Manny's out there. But he's like, if the 4400 go back to where they belong, if it's, no matter how things play out, maybe this could be his opportunity to kind of finally like move past it. But now getting that clock is like, no, there's definitely something here. So either Manny is here, or maybe that kid is tapping into it. I don't know. Because last episode I was thinking that kid was Manny, but it's like, I don't think he is. Because him and Jarrell passed him like last episode when the kid was coming in, so it's like the kid is tapping into something, whether it's like a greater beyond of like wherever Manny is, or whatever his circumstances is, like in the afterlife, the kid might have been like tapping into that, so that's why he drew the circle. Maybe he's the one that drew the circle, or maybe there is like a Manny and he's just out and about, and that kid is still just tapping into him. A lot of questions. I'm really curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I also looked into it a little bit, just like episode numbers. The 4400, the original show, ran a lot longer than I thought it did. It was like 5 seasons, but also apparently like season 1 and 5 are like 5 episodes. The other like 2, 3, and 4 were like 13 episodes each. I didn't realize it, because I think the show was canceled. I don't think it like actually, if I remember correct, I think it ends on like a big major cliffhanger, if I'm not mistaken. So, but once again, I have no intention of watching the original show, just so I don't conflate it with this reboot. But like I said, I'm interested to see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.